Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. And I want to start off this show by giving clarification of what I was talking about last week with the Bears. So the Bears signed Andy Dalton. I thought they were bringing him in as the backup, but as things came to whatever fruition at the end, Andy Dalton was announced that he's going to be their starting quarterback, Matt. Why? What do you think of that move?
Well, I think you bring him in as the starter for right now. And I think that definitely points to they're going to draft a quarterback. And then much like Ryan Fitzpatrick with the Dolphins was like, yeah, you're our starting quarterback. And then until they're like, no, we want to see how our rookie quarterback does. Like, I almost think that's going to be the way that they're setting this situation to be.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, they've been close with the game managing quarterback before. I mean, Dalton hasn't always been bad. He kind of looked really rusty at the beginning with the Cowboys, but I have the same feeling you have. They have to be thinking that they're going to take one of those quarterbacks in the draft. Everyone thinks that this draft is going to be very quarterback heavy and that there are a lot of top talents out there so that you might be able to snag one late. So they might not even have to use a top draft pick and get someone that they think they can develop. Why not have Andy Dalton come in? He's been fairly successful. I mean, it's been proven that you don't need a stud quarterback to have your new quarterback learn under. They just need a veteran guy that can teach them the ropes, help them learn film, catch up with the speed of the game, and then they can have successful careers. Like, you can learn behind a veteran quarterback as long as you trust that guy. Maybe they trust him. I thought that they were bringing him in and then they were still going to make their move for Russell Wilson or some other quarterback. But it's a crazy free agency. Getting into some Steelers stuff now before I continue on. The Steelers released Steven Nelson. He had originally asked for a trade. And I think what happened off the top is no one was willing to trade for him. So you got to remember, when we went through the list last week, there weren't a lot of teams that had cap space. So you're looking at a player that's going to be a heavy hit to the salary cap. His cut, Steelers end up cutting him. He said they're saving $8.25 million in salary cap space, which, as we went through to the Steelers, like, that's a big chunk. So is the loss going to hurt? Possibly. I'm not 100% sure how bad it's going to hurt. I think what hurts more is he's the fifth defensive starter that's going to leave the Steelers. Right now, Leilu's gone, Hilton, Bud Dupree, and Vince Williams. And now Steven Nelson. So you're taking a unit that everyone was saying, oh, I wish they stayed healthy. They had an undefeated run when they were healthy on defense. Once the injury started to hit them, then it looked like the offense stressed too much, got out of their element, started to turn the ball over. Ben Roethlisberger just wasn't able to get it done. Now you're losing some of those guys. Are you going to be able to reload in the draft and not lose any production? What do you think?
You know, the one crazy thing about Pittsburgh is that it always seems like they're able to retool and they're able to rebound quickly. I still think projection-wise, we were looking at them to be in the mix for a division title / wild card spot, and I still think that overall that's where they are. I think they're going to be in the mix. I still think that they're going to have their games that you're going to win, and you're going to have a couple that, for whatever reason, they just lose for no reason. But I think overall, like, they always seem to show up and split the series with Baltimore. Did they lose the series to Cleveland? I'm drawing a blank right now off the top of my head. But it's like they've been splitting series within the division. If you can consistently win within the division, you stand a pretty good chance of making the playoffs.
Yeah, typically they've beaten the Browns. But now you're looking at teams that come in, and their division is going to be one of, if not the toughest division in football. So
Absolutely.
last year they did split with the Browns. They lost that last season game where they sat the starters by 2 points. But they also split with the Bengals. And so the Bengals are rebuilding. How long is that rebuild going to take? They were able to sweep the Ravens last year, and that was big because if you're not able to sweep the Browns, you should have swept the Bengals. They were awful. So now what are you going to do? Because that division is going to be tough. You can't be dropping games like they did in out of conference or out of division matchups, like they lose to the Redskins or Washington Football, which might be their real name. And I'm wondering if they're doing that so that the Redskins name keeps being used. Because like when you've said Redskins for like 30 years, it's very hard for you just to drop it when you're thinking of the team. I mean, I could see if you're a fan of them, you're going to know the difference. But like for us, I don't follow them that much. So how am I going to remember them? I barely remember some of the teams that are bottom feeders. And let's be honest, Washington hasn't really been good in our lifetime. So just throwing that out there, as they're considering the name, it's almost like they want to be able to leave that door open because no one would bat an eye, almost like the Charlotte Hornets. Everyone kept calling them the Charlotte Hornets. I did it. I lived on here. I've never even been to a game where they were the Hornets. I've only been to their games when they were the Bobcats. And so finally they just were like, yeah, you know what? We're going to get the name back. So don't be shocked if like 10 years down the line, if they're doing like their throwbacks and they're just using the Redskins logo or something. I wouldn't be shocked by that at all. But back on topic with the defense, they signed Cam Sutton back. He's going to be most likely the favorite starter to start opposite of Joe Hayden. You're getting your linebackers back. I think you're going to have that strength. T.J. Watt, I know you're losing Bud Dupree on the other side. I mean, some rookie guys come in and they're able to make their presence felt. Now, a lot of them get drafted high. Like, look at Chase Young. So, can the Steelers get some guys in to get some production? Yes. So, I'm really not too worried about the defense. The main thing is the defense has to be productive enough so that the Steelers' offense doesn't press. Because we saw that happen. And where do they go from there? So, I don't know. Anything else you got on the defense?
No, well, I mean, I think having Fitzpatrick is a help because you saw with the stability from the safety position and how Pittsburgh uses their safeties. So I think having someone there to help with the over the top plays really gave Pittsburgh some help down the middle for teams that throw the post and throw those deeper throws. Having someone there that can actually break passes up and not just let them just run behind them is something that's going to be helpful.
And with the offense, you have Juju coming back. I was looking now to see if this happened before our show last week or not, but I think we didn't talk about it. And I could be wrong if I did, just to recap, because I don't know if everyone listens to every show. But he had offers from other teams, reportedly was looking to get paid much higher than what the Steelers ended up giving him. They gave him a 1-year deal. I was ready for them to let him go. The one thing that surprised me was that he reportedly took less money. He could have went to a rival. He could have went to the Chiefs. He could have went to the Ravens. So if you're looking at those and you're thinking which team has the most upside and they're offering you more money, like you would almost 100% want to go with the Chiefs, I would think. Because they're set up for another run, at least 1 or 2 more years. They've been in the last 2 Super Bowls. They won one. And you're going to get a lot of looks. I don't know. They had Sammy Watkins, another one of their receivers that were up on contracts. So those guys were productive. Sammy Watkins was always injured, it seemed. So you're going to be on the opposite side of Tyreek Hill, and you have Kelsey. You wouldn't have got a lot of attention. But stuck with Pittsburgh, and hopefully he comes out and earns that contract. I think the 1 year deal is really telling because the Steelers didn't trust him for multiple years. Otherwise, they would have signed him for multiple years. They're supposed to have a lot more cap space next year. And so Juju's kind of hedging his bets, thinking that he's going to have a big contract type year this year. So we'll see. Maybe that opens up another dimension of the offense where they can get someone that can run the ball and get some of that consistency going. Because if you don't have threats in the passing game, they can just stack the box. And I think that that's where Ben got a lot of pressure, where they're not even looking for the run anymore. So they're just sitting back, throwing him confused looks, blitzing corners and stuff, and then he's just throwing interceptions because at some point he has no idea what they're doing. So can they get maybe some more screens and stuff in the passing game to just get some consistency, even if they can't build the run? We'll see. But the receiver core seems like it's going to stick together, and that's probably a good thing for Ben's. I mean, we've been saying it for the past couple of years, his final run. It has to be ending soon, I would think.
I would have to agree with that. And I think I find it surprising that when you have those supposed offers from Kansas City or Baltimore, I'm almost wondering if that's Juju trying to put some fake interest out there, because Kansas City would have fit him a lot better, because he could have been in that Watkins role where he wasn't going to be relied on or penciled in as the number one receiver. And we've talked about it different times on this show where I don't know that having him as the number one is benefiting him. I think it helps when you have the bigger receivers outside and they can move him around in the slot and play a variety of places and move him around to hide him, so to speak. And I think that's kind of a role that really helps bring out his talents, because he does create mismatches. And when he's not fumbling, he is a good receiver.
Well, the Chiefs deal, it looks like, because I'm finding the article here now, the Ravens offered him supposedly $9 million, so $1 million more, and $4 million worth of incentives. The Chiefs offered him the same as the Steelers, $8 million, with $3 million of incentives. And so he's kind of just betting that, I mean, if you go to Kansas City, you sign a 1 year deal, and then they don't use you, I mean, who knows what the incentives are? You could be stuck where we talked about Le'Veon Bell last week. Where do you go? Like, they didn't use you enough to give any value to you. And if he comes there and has issues fumbling and stuff, like where is he going to go? He probably feels comfortable with Pittsburgh. Maybe he can get that. The Ravens deal seems like they just wanted an insider, because, like, why not do what the Patriots did with Harrison? Bring a guy in that knows the offense, that knows the rivalry, and maybe they can flip. And instead of losing both games, they can start to steal a game or two against the Steelers and then get ready for a playoff run. Because it's not like Juju's bringing playoff experience. So I don't know why else the Ravens would have wanted him so bad. But
unless it's just adding by subtracting. We'll sign him just so it's one more person, one more veteran that's not staying in Pittsburgh.
yeah, one more guy that Ben's not familiar with. I mean, that was my entire argument to bring Le'Veon Bell back. You just want guys that are consistently used to Ben's style of offense, that they can hopefully get the best out of him. Where, like Tom Brady, he goes into Tampa Bay, and now they're trying to keep everyone together because it took them half the year to get that consistency going. And it even took some of the playoff games. So, like, where do you go from there? But some of them, like Ben, I mean, look how long it took Drew Brees to retire. We talked about it like months ago. It feels like after the Super Bowl, everyone was like, yeah, he's done. And then he started to post videos of him, like, working out. And so then everyone's like, maybe he's not done. And then a couple of days later, then he just finally announced that he's retired. So I wonder if he did go through some workouts and they told him, like, look, you're not back at your level. Like, you're still where you are. Because I could see guys like that doing it. Like, why not just say, you know what, it's been a month, let's heal up and try to see how winter workouts would start. and they're like, look, you're still don't have velocity on the ball, like you're done. Almost like a pitcher in Major League Baseball. They see it, they know he's done, they just let him go. So it should be interesting. We got a big draft coming up, and I think that's going to show a lot of the direction in the AFC North here. What teams are going to be competing, because the Steelers are going to be in a tough spot if they don't make a push for the playoffs with Ben. That rebuild hits. Guess what? You wasted too much time. The Browns could easily become a juggernaut. Same with the Ravens if they ever take that next step. The Browns are really close this year to being in the Super Bowl. Like, don't forget that. They were that fumble at halftime that shouldn't have been a fumble. To have an lead, and who knows if Kansas City would have came back. Kansas City didn't look as explosive. Probably why they're trying to get a guy like Juju that can be reliable and has been used to being a number one, like you said, Matt. Why not have that as your second or third option? That would be a big improvement for them. Let's see. Around the league, the Eagles are signing our man, Joe Flacco. Why?
Because he's elite.
It makes no sense to what they're trying to do. Okay? They bring in, they fire their coach, and they say, look, we're going all in on Wentz. Next thing you know, Matt, gone. Wentz is gone. They're like, we got to get rid of him. Like, the new coach comes in, probably worked out with him, talked with him, and was like, are you kidding me? This is the guy? It's not going to work out. So then they're like, all right, you know what? We're going to go ahead and focus on like that spread offense with Jalen Hurts. Nothing says more spread than Joe Flacco. It's like, that's the first thing I think of. Like, oh, we need a veteran spread quarterback. What's Joe Flacco up to these days? The Ravens got rid of him. It's the same exact reason. They're like, yeah, we're going spread. We're going to bring in RG3, and we need to get rid of you. And then we're going to actually bring in some spread quarterbacks. And the Broncos take him, and they're like, all right, we got him. We got our quarterback. Gone. Now the Broncos don't even know who they're playing. So the Eagles are like, that's it. That's our guy. It's the same exact stuff that they had last year. They could have won the division, but they're flip-flopping quarterbacks, two different styles. Like, it's so hard for your offense to mesh. And then they use the coach as a scapegoat. Now they're setting up this new guy like, wow, done. I don't care if he went to high school in outside Philly and then he went to the University of Delaware, so he was really close. Like, who cares about that? Like, I saw that was like one of the things. Like, yeah, they're bringing him back home. He's from that area. It's like, who cares? You're like, this is a game. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing.
It almost reminds me of a Charlie Batch situation where he is an older veteran, and it's a point that they would be at is that if Hurts gets injured, they're hedging themselves, and they can use Flacco as a game manager to just not lose games for him. And I think that in that pinch hitter substitute role, he might be able to be successful, not be relied on the entire time now that he's getting up there in his career.
Yeah, but Batch could throw the ball, man. Like, I'm looking up some of his stats. Like, he played for Detroit, and even in the Steelers, like, he was still hitting like over 50% of his passes, whatever, and had a positive touchdown to interception ratio, had a good quarterback rating for a backup. But, like, he was decent for the Lions, came to Pittsburgh, and was able to just come in and fill in for some of those years where Ben was hurt. Because if you remember, Ben comes in, and then Batch had to play two games in 2005 as a starter, a game in 6 and 7, then like 2 games again in 2010. Like, he started multiple games a year for like 5 years for the Steelers.
I know, and I'm saying he could be in that role. Or, I mean, even look at what Byron Leftwich was doing in that pinch hitter role. I think he could do that.
I don't know. I still think Batch was more dynamic. I could be wrong because the rushing stats aren't really there. I mean, he had rushing stats with the Lions, like in 1998, he was averaging 5.6 yards a carry. But like that was a different time. When he was with the Steelers, he was more of just like that. I'm going to fit into like the Ben Roethlisberger mold. I'm going to stand back here and sling the ball. And I mean, you're right. He was just kind of the guy that don't mess it up. I just don't see Joe Flacco as that guy. I could be wrong. I mean, I know he won a Super Bowl, but even like that's why I thought the Bears were going with Andy Dalton. I thought, oh, that's a good pick for that situation. So maybe he'll be able to get something done. But I don't know. The Eagles, what they're doing, it looks like from the outside that they're just destroying their franchise. And if I watch the Steelers do something like that, I'd be so mad. Because it's almost like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing that? And then it's very similar to what the 49ers did, but the 49ers had been operating on such a higher level. I mean, I guess the Eagles did have a Super Bowl win. The 49ers didn't. But, like, they had a successful head coach. Let's sabotage him. Okay. Then you're going to bring in the next guy. Let's sabotage the roster. Oh, well, we need to get another guy now. Let's bring him in, get to the Super Bowl, and then start telling your starting quarterback that, yeah, you're not good enough. So it's like, what are you doing? Like some teams are like that. Other ones don't really say anything publicly. And so I don't know what strategy is the best. I guess we'll find out. Like Bill Belichick, could you imagine if he was out there being like, yeah, Tom Brady blew that Super Bowl against the Giants. Like, we need someone else here that can actually win. Like, anyone want to trade for him? Like, what team's going to line up and be like, you know what? The 49ers don't even like Garoppolo. We definitely need him. He's the missing link. So that's what the Eagles are kind of like right now. Like, Hurts, you're the guy, but we really don't like your style of offense. So we're going to bring in Joe Flacco. And then hopefully we're going to draft someone. I guarantee they draft another quarterback super high. I should put a bet on that. I don't know what their mindset's going to be, but I just have that feeling. New coach, veteran quarterback. Let's see if Hurts moves. It's just a weird situation. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. They're naming Flacco the backup to Hurts. But who knows? For now, yep. Because that's why I feel like with Dalton, like you're the starter now. Like he can't be pumped and being like, you know what, I am the guy. Like I would think that he has a ton of voices in his head that's like, you know what, I'm not the guy. Why would I be the guy? But these guys are competitors, so I could be wrong. Another deal that I thought was funny. Kyle Rudolph said he was going to sign with the Giants, and now he might not sign at all. They said that he might need foot surgery, and so he suffered the injury in December. But like they knew that was going in. I'm wondering if the Giants are trying to get him to pay less. But if I was him, like why not just say, whatever, I'm out. Like they had to have known he was injured. He was injured in December.
So he was suddenly not injured.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, that's the guy. Like it's a foot injury. How many guys have retired recently because of a bad foot injury? Like zero. Like you would think that he'd be coming back. Like as long as they gave him time to heal, he'd probably be fine. So I don't know. Some of that stuff I hate because you know that the owners are just trying to get a cheaper deal when they can, especially this year. Steelers, like when they cut Nelson, I was like, all right, that makes sense. Let's get some salary cap room and just go with it. I mean, if no one wants the guy, you're not going to do yourself any favors if you can just get out of it. But I don't know. It's going to be something that we'll see if other teams face this issue next year, or like if everything comes back, fans are allowed in, if there's going to be a gigantic like boost in free agency moves next year. Because like Juju's setting it up, a bunch of other players are just signing quick deals, and so don't be surprised if you see some major movement at the beginning of next year in free agency, because you're going to have that boosted salary cap. Why sign for multiple years? You don't even know if there's going to be fans in the stands for real. They're talking about it now, but it's kind of like maybe. Anything else you have on the free agency stuff?
No.
I did have one other NFL topic, because Deshaun Watson, we talked about him, but at this point, I'm almost wondering if other teams knew. So he has multiple lawsuits, man. And I know I don't normally talk about like stuff like this on the show, but it's such a big story that I feel like we have to mention it, just because it could swing the entire NFL. Like, he's a good enough quarterback that teams should be lined up. Like the Bears, they're signing Andy Dalton and going with him as their starter. Like, the Texans were looking to get Deshaun Watson out of town, couldn't move him. And some of the comments, I went back and looked at them, because a lot of them were floating around. I mean, you saw some reports where he had said that there was trouble in Houston. And like the way he phrased it, everyone thought that he was talking about the head coaching search or whatever. But now, what if it was a lawsuit? He knew they were coming. And so he was just trying to get out. Like, it's really weird. Everyone's saying, like, look at the timeline. It's really weird. It's like, no, free agency started. Most other quarterbacks that were moved or moving, they've already moved. Like, the Texans don't want to be sitting on him unless maybe they're waiting for like a draft day trade. But every day that this goes on sinks his value. So the Texans aren't going to be able to make that move. So it makes no sense for them to hold it for now, because like,
well, I'm almost wondering if
go
there's
ahead.
two parts to that. Like, if number one, if they're looking at, like, if the Texans knew, and then were trying to trade him to someone, and then it comes out all these allegations came out, would they be? I would think that they would still be held. Like, they would have to give up forfeit picks or some kind of compensation, like, to the team that they're trading with. Like, well, you knew this was coming, and we weren't informed. And that may be why you didn't see more offers on the table, because if the NFL's going to step in, and based off of what they've done to previous players, if he has to sit a year and you're having to give up 3 first-round picks for him, well, then it makes no sense to try to trade for him right now when you're not going to get any return value for him for at least a year, if not longer.
And I've been trying to wrap my head around it. And I know with today's like social media, you just see a ton of accusations. But like, they initially said that there were 6 allegations of assault from him. I guess they're his masseuse, right? So he was hiring these women to give him a massage, and then he was making unwanted advances on them. And so you would think, okay, if it's only one, and he has text messages to prove that nothing was there, but then there's 16 lawsuits now. The rumor is it might go all the way up to 24. Who the hell has 24 different masseuses, Matt? He was with Houston for 4 years. He's going through them. Like, that's 6 masseuses a year. Like, that's like a red flag, I would think. So, like, in Houston's defense, maybe they don't know. And like you said, if they did trade him, maybe they had no idea. But with this many women, like, I would assume that there might be a paper trail. And so I'm not going to comment on like the legal stuff. Like, we'll let the process play itself out and see what happens. Because, I mean, I would hate for his reputation right now, if it's not true, is going to be ruined. Like, where would you even go from this? Because it's been so public already, and they just got filed. I don't know. It's mind-blowing. But, like, as all players, and I bring this up because I know we have some high school football players that are, like, looking to get into college, maybe play some games, or even some college players listening to this, like, always protect yourself, because you never know. And it's like, you would think that younger players would know, like, hey, if you do have text messages where you're apologizing for your behavior, like, that stuff's going to be saved. So I mean, like if the evidence is there, it's there. Like you can't talk your way out of it if it's in the law, like in the court of law. So it's crazy, and it's going to be a shakeup because that was supposed to be one of the biggest dominoes for the free agent period, or like even this offseason as a whole. But damn, dude, it's crazy. People were pulling tweets out from like when he was in college and stuff. So did you see that?
Yeah,
So
I saw a little bit of it. Sometimes I have a hard time with like people going back because I mean if Twitter was around when we were in high school, I mean it would have like, there would have been dumb things. I'm sure there's dumb things if you dig up there. Oh, like, I'm sure that it's there.
I still remember, Matt, whenever Facebook first came out, and there were players at the University of Iowa that had posted a bunch of images of them just with wads of cash that they had stolen. And like it took a while for them to be kicked off the team because at first like the prosecutors couldn't believe it. They were like, why would they have these images with the evidence? like, why would they just take these pictures and put it on their Facebook? Like, what even is a Facebook? Because I remember that being like one of the original things. And if people want to look it up, actually, I think I did put it on our one of the images I had saved. I think it's on the Southbound Sports Instagram. If you go back through, so check that out. You can follow us there. But that's one of the ones where it's like, hey, this is a big deal because these guys are losing their scholarships and they're getting arrested. So, wow, that was a shocker back in like the mid 2000s or whatever that would have even been. But now it's like, I mean, you're going back in time. Like, yeah, you're right. So then I only brought that up because now they're opening up questions for like Dabo Sweeney. And he basically said the same thing. Like, let's let the law play it out. Because sometimes he says outrageous stuff. So I was worried, like, what's he going to say? But he just said, we'll see what happens. I don't know. It's crazy. But that's going to be a shocker. And even, I mean, if you're a guy coming into the league, like, that should be a wake-up call. Like, what are you doing? Because I would even assume that the team has their own training staff, right?
Yes.
Which even because like a lot of these questions are just they're just red flags to me because like
But if you're going to the massage parlor and the team training staff isn't having sex with you the way you want, then you got to go off site.
I mean I guess, but that's what I'm saying. Like in his defense, like just trying to keep an open mind, and the way it's so public. How are they even going to find jurors if it's a jury trial? And I don't know if they do those as jury trials, but that whole thing is going to be a mess. Let's see what going back around as we wrap up some of the NFL stuff though. The Steelers now with their salary cap stuff. Let's see, what do we have for the draft? Looks like they're going to have just enough to get under the salary cap for their draft picks. But they still have a lot of guys on the dead cap. So like Steven Nelson's still hitting $6 million right now as a cap hit. Same with Pouncey, Vince Williams, Vance McDonald. So you're hitting a bunch of guys. It's just almost it hurts because they're still left with only $10 million right now. But what's going to happen when those draft picks hit? I don't know. I don't know what other moves they can make. Was there anything else in the NFL you wanted to hit on today?
No.
We're getting really big into, or not really big, we're getting really close to the big draft period, one of my favorite periods of the off season, because you're right around the time where we're in the NCAA tournament, starting to get ready for the draft, but then you also have NBA playoffs and NHL playoffs starting, beginning of baseball. If you're a Pirates fan, though, you probably don't look forward to that. But a lot of great stuff coming up, and we'll see what other moves, because there are going to be some other big moves this offseason. I just don't know what they're going to be yet. Even Le'Veon Bell, he's hinting, Matt, that something big is going to happen in April. Do you think it's back to the Steelers?
I don't know. I said no, but who knows?
What else would it be? He said, April 4th, I'm coming crazy. April 4th, man. That's right. Is that around Easter? So
Yep.
it has to be right around that time. I wonder if they were waiting to see what the Steelers were doing in terms of cap space, what moves they could make. Could it happen? I don't know. Right now they're in a decent spot from a salaries perspective. He doesn't require a lot of money anymore. What other moves would be crazy and really pump the team up because you're losing all these defensive guys? What better way, Matt, than to just go all offense? You get Juju back. He's going to have a contract year, so he has to show out. Why not bring Le'Veon Bell back?
Follow the Atlanta Falcons model and just go all offense.
That could be true, but they also never made any defensive moves. Like the Steelers have been making defensive moves, so their defense is decent. And Ben's a little bit more mobile than Matt Ryan and has had more success. I mean, I guess the Falcons have been in the Super Bowl more recent, though. Maybe that is the way they want to go. Basically, though, the NFL's sitting there waiting to see what's going to happen with James Conner. James Conner. Could the Dolphins be interested? I don't know. Him and Le'Veon Bell are just sitting there waiting. Wouldn't it be weird if they both ended up back in Pittsburgh? Like no one else wanted them. But that's going to be the main thing. Would he come back? He said he likes the idea of coming back to Pittsburgh. Le'Veon Bell did. Steven Delson, all the defensive guys are going. It would be one way to get the fans more excited next year. So we'll see. Getting into the NCAA tournament. Oh, man. I should have stuck with my gut. I had a feeling, I think I mentioned it at the top of the show, that the Big Ten, I didn't think that they were going to do good. Because my thoughts, it's not really because the teams. I don't think the teams are overrated. I really think that there's an issue in the Big Ten with the way they officiate the games. And so there's been some crazy things that happened over the weekend. And I wanted to talk about one of them because I sent it to you. So VCU had to drop out of the tournament. They dropped out because of coronavirus cases. I don't think the NCAA really ever came out and said what was going to happen. But if you follow the games that they played, I'm going to look it up just to see if anything broke this afternoon as I go through this. They were in contact with a referee that stayed in their hotel that also officiated games within the last couple of days with Duke. Also had problems. Georgia Tech also had problems in the ACC thing. And so you're going through and you have a ref that's just there in the tournament testing positive. He's the same ref that came back or official, I guess, and got sent home. Because remember, the hotels weren't ready. I don't know if we talked about it on the show, but they come down to Indianapolis. The hotels aren't ready. A couple of the officials go together, go out to eat. When they go to check into their hotel, they all test, or he tests positive, and so they send them all home because of the contact tracing. So could it have been all from the Atlantic 10? And so if you follow that, the Atlantic 10 and the ACC were using the same officials. Like the officials were just traveling back and forth, staying in the hotel. And St. Bonaventure was there because St. Bonaventure then played LSU. So I've been worried that LSU played Michigan. What if it takes a day or two to show up? St. Bonnie's have some positives, LSU have some positives, and then Michigan has some positives going into this weekend. Like you can't roll it out. But it's pretty crazy. And I'm bringing up the officials because a lot of the other conferences, they use the same officials throughout the year. The Big Ten has their own officials that officiate like it's 1990, Matt. Everyone's allowed to throw elbows. You come in, it's really slow and boring, and everyone talks about like, oh, the Big Ten, they're just beating each other up and they're not ready for the tournament because they're all worn out. It's like, why? Why? Like, does the Big Ten administration not realize that every team that keeps winning in the tournament, you get a paycheck for? So they're like units. Every team that goes through, like I think I found an article, and I should have took a screenshot. So when Loyola Chicago made their Final Four run last time, it was like the year Michigan beat them, 2018, I think. They made $8 million for their conference, just them. So if you would count up, like if 3 Big Ten teams come make it to the Final Four, that's like an extra $24 million in a year when everyone's hurting. But instead, the Big Ten's like, nope, got to stick with tradition. We got to have our guys play 10 games the last 2 weeks of the tournament to where they're getting tired. And I don't even think it was a tired thing. I honestly think the officiating is just so different that when they get in the tournament, those guys aren't allowed to just throw elbows and bully around. Like Illinois, one of the teams, I didn't pick them on the show. I said, there's no way. Like, I didn't think they were going to beat Loyola Chicago because their whole game was, let's throw it in the post, let him bully down low. He didn't have the height. It's not like when he was up against Hunter Dickinson from Michigan, 7-foot guy, just bullied him, and the rest didn't call anything that entire game. So you're able to just back him up, throw some elbows, and then put Michigan's guy in foul trouble. What happens? Illinois then blows them out. So, all right, you get into the NCAA tournament then? Guess what? They don't let you do that. They're calling offensive fouls. You're getting in trouble. And then the Big Ten teams are just lost, and it gets embarrassing pretty fast. So I wasn't shocked. I wish I would have stuck with my gut and picked some more upsets in my bracket. I just didn't see like Ohio State losing to Oral Roberts. But all of those teams that play bully ball, out. Illinois, out. Ohio State, out. Iowa, out. I mean, it was like clockwork, Matt. Did you watch any of the games? Did you see that?
I did, and I have a hard time with some of it because I feel like in some of the games, and maybe I sound a little bit broken recordish, but I almost like the bully ball style and just letting them play because I hate when the refs get too particular with the fouls early on and they put teams because I mean to be honest, Florida State's one of the teams that typically ends up being on the end of they get into foul trouble early and then it affects the rest of the game or the way that the game's played. And I don't like when officials change the way that the game is being played based on penalties and fouls and different things like that. They should be in the shadows and not in the middle of the action. And they're obvious. I'm not saying I don't want like blatant calls not to be called, but at the same time, don't just hammer teams to the point that it changes the way that the game is being played.
Well, the one game that stands out to me is like the two game. Well, I guess both games Michigan played in. The first game against like Texas Southern, Matt, there were like 40 fouls on that game. A foul a minute in a 16-1 game. Michigan led by like 20 points the entire game. And yet they were just calling fouls. And it was bad both ways. I'm not saying like it was against Michigan because I think the same thing happened in the LSU game where at one point the refs were just calling foul. Like the game was a game of runs. Which team was getting the foul calls? Like it was bad. It was almost like they got together and they said, you know what? Start of the second half, we're going to call 6 fouls on Michigan real quick. Because LSU was in the bonus with like 15 minutes left. I texted you. I said, fouls are 6-1 right now. It's 17 minutes left in the game. Like, at what point do you just say, like, all right, some of these are ticky-tack fouls. Why are you calling them? That game could have been one of the greatest games in tournament history, and the refs ruined it. Because LSU had no bench. I don't know what the hell their coach is doing, where you decide to play, like, your top 2 guys 40 minutes, Matt. 40 minutes. They got 0 break. So if you watch the game, the entire first half, they were on fire. It was like 43-42. And everyone's thinking, like, this is going to be a shootout. This game's going to be badass. Not so fast. The refs are like, no, we can't have this. No way. No way can we have this game be awesome and have people, enjoy the NCAA tournament. So they come out, call a bunch of fouls on Michigan. Then they're like, oh no, we can't have that. So we got to immediately call a bunch of fouls on LSU so that both teams are in the bonus with like over 10 minutes left. And then from there, it just kept going to where there was almost 40 fouls called in that game. So Michigan plays 2 games in the tournament, 80 fouls called. Like, who's enjoying that? like I get Texas Southern and Michigan has a ton of size on them. So, like, they're driving to the hoop. They might get some calls or whatever. But, like, a foul a minute, that's not fun. And they ruined that game because the longer they kept extending it, the more tired you could just see LSU go. I think I texted you at one point. There was like 5 minutes left in the game. LSU missed like 5 to 10 layups in a row because they were so tired. The ball was just hitting the top, like the front of the rim, like they couldn't get enough elevation. And I thought, like, the refs really screwed them. You can say, like, LSU, like, their coach should have took them out and gave them rest. Yeah, I see that. But there also shouldn't have been that many fouls in the game. Like, who is that for? I would think a lot of casual fans go and watch college basketball just at the tournament, and they're like, all right, here's our primetime game Monday night. Oh, ref ball. Like, awesome. Awesome. Great game. Thanks, guys. And so I hope they cleaned it up. And I just wish, because like a lot of people were saying, the Big Ten, they had their own crew for the coronavirus. So like that, the same thing that happened to VCU didn't happen to the Big Ten teams in their tournaments or whatever. But I just want them to say, like, look, let's just hire NCAA refs and then have them come in and call the game so that our teams are, used to the style. Because it's more of like an NBA style once you get to the college tournament. And like some of these smaller conferences, they don't have their own refs. So they're using the same ones from the NCAA tournament. And I think that's why you're starting to see a lot more upsets. They're used to that style of play. They like it to be faster. Michigan got just an unlucky draw, I guess, because a lot of the other games, there were not that many fouls at all. And some of them were just like awesome boat races. If you watch like that Ohio State Oral Roberts game, that was back and forth at the end. I think it ended up going to overtime, didn't it? And then ends up losing. That was an awesome game. I don't remember there being a lot of fouls. But it was kind of like, all right, Big Ten, now's your chance. If you want to be a champion, like a conference that comes out and shows like, all right, we have the best teams, do your team some favors. Like, why have so many games at the end of the year? It's the same thing for football. They're like, hey, we watched the SEC heal up before rivalry week, schedule a cupcake, do all this other stuff, have the refs like do their thing, and then the Big Ten's like, you know what? No, we're still going to do weird things. We're going to let Penn State win the conference, but we're going to recommend Ohio State go to the playoffs. We're going to go ahead and we're going to not let any team get a break so that a lot of people, they look at Harbaugh's record and they're like, Harbaugh loses the end of the year. The Big Ten schedule, like they're giving Michigan a bye in September, Matt. And they don't get another break until November. And I look at the team, it's always like, oh yeah, Michigan has a lot of injuries at the end of the year. Like, okay, why are you letting your teams do that? Why is Ohio State coming into the playoffs hobbled? Give your teams a rest. Like, help your teams out. Because of tradition? You can't say it's because of the cold, because that's the one thing they always say. Guess what? There are MAC schools right there that would probably love an opportunity, especially if they're undefeated late in the year, to like get a Big Ten win. So they would gladly play you. Just like the SEC has like the Sun Belt teams or whatever teams they call up November 21st or whatever that weekend usually is. So that's my thing on the Big Ten. I watched the tournament. I watched all the Big Ten games. They looked lost. Illinois made 0 adjustments. How embarrassing. Iowa extends Fran McCaffrey. The dude has never won a Big Ten title. Never made a Sweet 16 at Iowa. I think he might have made one at Siena. What are you extending him for 8 years for? However long they extended him. Like, the other thing that annoyed me, like, I don't know, Luka Garza. Iowa made a big deal out of retiring his number. Why? Why? In the middle of the year, Matt, they just got bounced in the tournament. I understand if you want to retire someone's number because he's like your leading scorer or whatever. He's a great guy. He does community work. Do it in the offseason. Why do it before the tournament where they get an embarrassing loss against Oregon?
Because there's no time like right now.
Like, oh, yep, we have to just honor this guy. And I've said it because I have a theory, like some of these bigger teams, you get guys like that, they come in, they have all the hype, and everyone's talking about, like, how's guards going to play, how's guards going to play. It has to hurt the locker room. Then you have teams like when they're looking at Michigan, everyone picked Michigan to be the first number 1 seed out. They said they're going to lose because Livers isn't playing. I even said the same thing. Are they going to have someone step up? So far, Eli Brooks and Sean Day Brown have stepped up, hit a ton of threes yesterday against LSU. If that continues, they might not even miss Livers. But you have to think, like, when the outside basketball writers are all just talking about one guy, has to fracture the locker room. Maybe Livers being out could be a great thing for Michigan. I think when Ayo went out for Illinois, they played much better. Guess what? He comes back in the NCAA tournament, looked like garbage. Don't move the ball, just play ISO. It's like, what are you doing? I have the Big 12 on here too, because they were the second best conference, everyone said. I think they only have one team left alive. The Big 10 has Michigan. The Big 12 has Baylor. No one would have picked that coming in. Everyone's like, all right, they're going to be out, whatever they're doing. But now the Pac-12 has, like, what, 4 teams left? They could all be eliminated except for 2 of them are playing each other. So they're at least going to have one in the Elite Eight, either USC or Oregon. The Oregon State's playing Loyola Chicago, which it's setting up for another Final Four run for them. They're going to play a 12-seed Oregon State. Then they're going to play a 2-seed Houston that didn't look good against Rutgers, had to come back and win, or an 11-seed Syracuse. They could be back in the Final Four. And I know we have some Pitt listeners to this show. I said Pitt should be right on the phone with Loyola's coach Moser and saying, what do you need? What do you need? Because a lot of people, he was one of the names on Michigan's list before they hired Juwan Howard, and he was apparently getting good traction. And I think the knock on him was, like, he only had one good year. But now it seems like he knows what he's doing. He's winning with lesser talent, which is what Pitt would have. I mean, they tried to bring in the big-time recruiters to Pitt. Guess what? It's not working. You need a guy that can come in with their own style. Look at what Syracuse is doing. They have their zone defense that they run that teams in the ACC can usually beat because they see it multiple times a year. In the tournament, no one sees that defense. And guess what? They're always a wild card to go far in the tournament. Same with West Virginia's press and their fast-paced defense. Like, if them and Syracuse didn't match up, I could see both of them making a Final Four run. I know West Virginia was a higher seed as a 3 seed, but I don't know. It's looking like Loyola Chicago. In terms of, let's just go through my Sweet 16 picks right now. I want to say, I don't want to count out Oregon State, but the Pac-12 has been so inconsistent all year. That's why they didn't have teams that were highly rated. And it's not like the Pac-12 was underrated. The last couple years, they were the team like the Big 10 or the Big 12 where they didn't have a Sweet 16 team. They only had one Sweet 16 team or whatever it was. Like, they haven't shown up at all. Now it looks like they're finally coming back to their average where they have multiple good teams. And that could be one of the best games of the weekend. Loyola Chicago. I didn't like how Houston played. I think Syracuse will win. I think Loyola Chicago is well coached enough that they could be on the path to the Final Four. What do you think of that region?
I have to agree with you. I think maybe this isn't just a flash in the pan, and gonna give them the nod.
I mean, like, Indiana's looking for a coach. Like, I wouldn't hire him for Indiana because Indiana, at some point, you expect that you should be recruiting at the level like Michigan can come in and land the number one class with Juwan Howard and his NBA ties. Indiana should be able to hire a coach and land a top 3 class. Like, that should just be the expectation for them. So they don't need a guy like that. They need a guy that knows his stuff. Like, Michigan's getting the recruiting class next year that they never had under Beeline. And guess what? They look pretty well coached against LSU. They threw those adjustments in. LSU was hitting a ton of shots. They started to do their press, like in the first half, like 5 minutes in, really messed them up and allowed Michigan to battle back. Then they let go. Michigan or LSU started to pull away. Like, that's the kind of coach that like Indiana needs or whatever. But Pitt right now, they could have that guy. I don't see a lot of people throwing offers at him. Loyola Chicago has proven that he can win in a city. I know they didn't really do as well in their conference as expected or like what they should if he was a top tier coach. But all Pitt needs is consistency like that and a chance that if they're well coached enough and they get a couple seniors that they can make a run. That's all Pitt needs right now. So why not? And I hate to harp on it. So we'll go to the next region. I'm kind of going backwards. Baylor and Villanova and Arkansas and Oral Roberts. Who do you have coming out of that one?
I'm going to have to say Villanova.
See, go ahead.
I mean, I just think that they've played well over the last couple of years. I think that consistency is going to continue.
I don't want to overreact. I mean, they blew out North Texas. And North Texas beat up Purdue, but Purdue has been known to choke. Like, I don't even know if Purdue's ever made a Final Four for like a basketball school. Michigan's made like 2 in the past 10 years. Like, Purdue, you would think that they would at least make 1. Like, I don't know if they did. Like, I know they were close to 1 year to Virginia and they blew it. But like, I don't know how impressive that is. But the one team I want to see is Baylor. Like, they were the clear number 2 team this entire year. So I'm back on the Baylor train. I thought that they would lose to North Carolina because I thought North Carolina would be able to match up with them with their athletes, but they couldn't even get past Wisconsin. Like, North Carolina looked so poorly coached. Wisconsin is one of the Big Ten teams that I think is well coached, and they just ran into that Baylor juggernaut and couldn't do anything. And so that's where I think Villanova's coming in hot. I do like that game, and I think that's going to happen. I think they play Arkansas. I mean, Oral Roberts has looked good, but some of the SEC stuff where they're scoring, and they've been pretty well in that conference, seeing how they had to compete against LSU and how good Alabama looked. I would say Baylor's going to play them, and I think Baylor's going to show why they're the number 1. Obviously with the weird matchup in the lower side of that bracket where I think Loyola Chicago could come out, I think Baylor is going to be in the national championship. If I was taking a second pick, it might be Villanova, Matt. And then third, I would say Loyola Chicago. Because I think if Villanova can get through Baylor, they do have the experience. I think they have some injuries, though. But that could be a classic just side of the bracket where it's almost like at one point you're looking at it and it's like a 5 and an 8 in the Final Four, and you're like, what is going on? So that's a big one. I'm going to save our side for last. So you have Gonzaga and Creighton, and then USC and Oregon. Oregon has looked good, but they didn't play that first game. So they came out against Iowa. They were fresh. Like, Iowa had just played like 2 days ago. So don't throw that out. I'm not making excuses for Iowa because Oregon has a way better coach. USC looked lights out last night, though, killing Kansas. They have some top NBA prospects for once in a while. I mean, they haven't had that for a long time. And so now they're coming out. I think it's going to be USC. And I think they're going to play Gonzaga. And that's where Gonzaga really has to prove that they're a number 1. I think Gonzaga wins. I'm still high on them. They faced some adversity with Oklahoma and then ended up pulling away and almost winning by 20. So this is their year. They've done it before. Like I said, the Pac-12 hasn't been as consistent. Sure, they showed up at the first 2 weeks of the contest or the tournament, but they kind of had favorable matchups. The only one was like the Kansas blowout with USC. That's why I think that they'll give Gonzaga a game, but I think this is the Zags year still. I had them winning the whole thing. My mind hasn't changed, so that's my pick. What do you think?
I think they've been playing well throughout the course of the year. So I mean, it's not outside of the realm of possibilities that they're going to continue that success and win it all. So I think that's a fair assessment, and I would go with them as well.
Creighton struggled with UCSB. They won by 1 point. Like Gonzaga, this game should just be a tune-up game for them. So I think they're going to be fresh. You have USC and Oregon in conference. They hate each other because Oregon's been stealing a lot of recruits down in California in both football and basketball. Like that's going to be a tough, hard-fought game where I think that they're going to take a lot out of it, and then they're going to go and face Gonzaga, be able to play tough, and I think it's going to look like what LSU looked like at the end of the Michigan game, where they just don't have enough. Like Gonzaga's depth is going to be the key. And I think that's where a couple teams like Michigan has that depth right now. I know they have the Livers injury, but they have the depth that they can go with Gonzaga. Baylor has that depth. And then everyone else in the tournament, I don't know. Will that depth come into play again? Could. We'll see. But I think that's going to be one of the keys to get Gonzaga back in the Final Four. And then, of course, our bracket, Michigan and Florida State again. Why? Why they always put us in the same bracket, man? I feel like the past, 3 tournaments? Florida State's been in 3 straight Sweet 16s. Michigan's been in 4 straight Sweet 16s. Where's the respect? Like, why not put Florida State in the Midwest? I mean, they're putting them in the East. You know that it really wasn't by regions or whatever. Or hell, even switch Florida State with Villanova at this point. Because then their draw would have been Winthrop and then Purdue / North Texas or whatever. Or if they were the 5 seed, yeah, they would. Or if they were the 4 seed, they would have been Purdue. So they would have played North Texas and then Villanova or whatever. But like now, like they keep matching us up for some reason, and it's like I don't know if they're not giving Florida State the respect that they deserve. But like now, their matchups are getting way harder because now if Florida State wants to make the Final Four, they have to beat number 1 seed Michigan, and then most likely number 2 seed Alabama. Like, it's just crazy that that's the draw they gave them. Put them in the Midwest. Let them be the 4 there. Instead of Oklahoma State, they could have opened at Liberty, then played Tennessee or Oregon State, and then, of course, like Illinois or Loyola Chicago. Like, I think that would have been a much better draw and given them some respect. Like, I don't think they're giving Hamilton the respect he deserves. Last year's Florida State team was good. I went back and looked at it because I know you're claiming national championships, but they weren't as good as Kansas and even Dayton last year. But in the tournament, you don't know. Florida State could have easily been a number 1 seed last year and made a run. And this year, with the way they did the seeding, it was almost like, yeah, we're not going to give some of these big schools favorable draws. Like, let's make Michigan and Florida State earn it by playing each other. When, like, Michigan, they could have easily played Purdue. And I know they might have just been trying to split up the conference or whatever. Or hell, I know Florida State didn't want to be in Virginia's shoes having to play Gonzaga again because that's who they gave them last time, remember? So it's like, oh, you can play Gonzaga or Michigan. Like, great draw, Florida State. But then, like I said, the other game's UCLA, which UCLA very easily could have been Michigan State because Michigan State took that game to overtime. I think they missed a free throw or a rebound or something. And UCLA has the luckiest draw. They play BYU. I know BYU played Gonzaga tough, but UCLA and Michigan State both had the athletes. I think I had the winner of that game picked coming up. Texas choked again. So then they would have got to play Abilene Christian. And they're basically right into the Sweet 16. That was an easy path for them. Now they have to play Alabama. Alabama almost hit 50% of their threes. I know UCLA has talent, but that Alabama team, I don't think is going to be stopped. So I had Michigan going through this. I don't know. I think Michigan Alabama is going to be the matchup. I think Michigan beats Florida State. I know Florida State has the length, but right now the way Michigan's shooting, like if Florida State came out cold against Michigan like they did against Colorado, they'd be run out of the building. Like Michigan was able to just shoot shot for shot with LSU at the end of that game, and LSU was shooting lights out. LSU puts up 78, and Michigan beats them by 8, covers the spread. Every single analyst for CBS picked Michigan to not cover that 4.5-point spread, and they covered it. So that's with Livers out. Seems like they're spreading the ball around more. They could all obviously have a poor shooting night and be done. I think every team faces that. But right now, I'm saying Michigan has the size to match up with Florida State. Not a lot of teams do. And I think when Florida State does play teams like that, they struggle. And they foul a lot. Because like, look at what they did with Notre Dame. Notre Dame had like 30-something foul shots in that game. So if Michigan's able to drive to the basket and get Florida State fouling, I think they advance. And then it's the shootout with Alabama. I think you could see another epic like that LSU-Michigan game could have been. But let's just switch this week just for sakes. And I'll say Alabama through. What do you think?
Well, before I get into some of that, I think you made some really good points. Florida State tends to get themselves in trouble where they try to see, like if Michigan is knocking shots down, to try to get themselves into a situation where they're starting to try to go shot for shot, I got to agree with you. Like it'll be a really ugly beatdown because I've seen that happen over the course of the last couple of years where they try to play at those, and maybe it's the youth of the team that they try to play at whatever tempo the other team's playing at instead of playing their own style. And when they're working the ball and generating opportunities, they like you look at the game last night as it was close, and then it was like they just decided just to start working the ball inside, using their length, and got a bunch of dunks in that were able to really turn the tide and start opening up the gap. I think if they play that style and don't try to force the unnecessary 3-pointers, I think that Florida State has a chance to be competitive in that game and win it out. There's one factor that we need to look at when going through this game is Jabril Peppers going to be playing for Michigan this week. If Jabril Peppers isn't playing, then I got to go with Florida State.
And by Jabril Peppers, you mean Isaiah Livers this time? Because he hasn't been playing. And I don't think he's coming back all tournament, which is my other point. Because, like, in terms of, like, the poor reffing, and, like, it seemed like Michigan was under fire, Isaiah Livers has been on the sideline wearing a not NCAA property t-shirt, which apparently a bunch of Big Ten players all started this movement called Not NCAA Property, where they're trying to get paid for playing basketball in the Big Ten. And guess what? All those Big Ten schools got eliminated. Coincidence, Matt? You don't think those guys in the NCAA headquarters were like, get these guys off my screen? And then by some crazy miracle, Michigan, John D. Brown comes in and just starts hammering threes, and the NCAA is like, Mayday, Mayday, what's going on? He's like, get LSU the ball, and then they just started missing layups, and they were done, and they're like, we blew it. The Big Ten could have been out. We never would have saw the not NCAA property T-shirts again. Now it's like all over ESPN. I saw it today where they were talking about it and how like Livers is right there wearing that black T-shirt with the hashtag on it. So who knows? I still think that's going to be a big thing. Paying the players is really going to open it up because when you get to those bigger schools, I've been saying it, how many of the schools left are mainly football schools? Alabama, Michigan, Florida State. If I was telling you, hey, there's a tournament, Matt, coming up, these are the team that's in it, USC, Michigan, Florida State, Alabama, you would think I'm talking football, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you're like, oh, even Arkansas, Baylor. Like people think Baylor, they're either going to think their football team in recent years, maybe
Or
women's basketball. But I mean, now with the Big East, I said I was high on the Big East. I really blew the Georgetown one. I thought that they were going to have one crummy team come in that was finally clicking, and I picked the wrong conference, Matt. It was Oregon State. They came in, they've been on fire. But the Big East, I picked my wrong teams. I picked Georgetown and UConn. I should have picked Villanova and Creighton. So I got two of them, but I had the wrong ones. I don't know. If UCLA beats Alabama, that's doing Michigan or Florida State a favor. Because I think if UCLA beats Alabama, the winner of Michigan and Florida State is going to be in the Final Four. I still don't think either of them beat Gonzaga, though. But we'll be able to talk through our Final Four picks next week. I did have one more stat for you that I drew up, and it is regards. We were talking about the football tournament, the potential 16-team playoff, and this tournament. But I'll save a lot of that for next week, just because we won't have as many teams to pick through. But right now, I found the stats. So 63 of the basketball champions since the tournament expanded, 63% are number one seeds. So if you're looking at this tournament and you want to make a smart bet, you're picking either Michigan, Gonzaga, or Baylor. Like it just happens. But then it gets even worse. So 31 out of 35 champs have been either the 1, 2, or 3 seeds. So then you have a couple more options in play. Houston didn't look good as a 2 seed. I would throw them out, honestly, if it was me. Like, I don't think that side's going to win it. I think you're down to Alabama, Michigan, Gonzaga, Baylor, and potentially Arkansas, which is another team I would throw out because I don't think they're going to get through Baylor or the winner of Baylor or Villanova. So if you're a betting man, take one of those top seeds. Like I said, I'm not saying that Florida State as a 4 seed can't get to the Final Four. That's national championships. Because right now you can take the national championship bet on the Sweet 16 and you can get fairly good odds. But Gonzaga right now would be my number one. And if you hedged your bets and maybe just picked the 1 seeds and had somebody on Gonzaga, Baylor, and Michigan, I don't know if you'd be in a winning proposition, but it would have to be close. And you would think that one of those teams has to be the favorite. Could you imagine if Gonzaga waltzed in the championship game with a 12 seed Oregon State or something? They would probably just be praising the Lord, Matt. I mean, the only thing that would be negative is if Sister Jean was there with Loyola Chicago, throwing up prayers to cancel out their prayers on the Gonzaga side. So that's my final thing. I can't believe she's still alive, Matt. She's 100-something years old.
I saw a stat today that when she was born, Babe Ruth was hitting. He had a really good day at the plate for the Red Sox. He wasn't even playing for the Yankees when she was born.
Yeah, one of the rare people that was I remember when Babe Ruth did this, or yeah, I knew him. It's he's a real guy. That would be my response.
He owes me money.
Because that was 2018 was the year Michigan beat them in the Final Four. And everyone was hoping Michigan would lose that game. I remember it. And then Michigan got unlucky by playing Villanova in the national championship. So we don't want Nova. If any team goes on a run, please be Oral Roberts. A Michigan Oral Roberts national championship would be really sweet for me. I think I'd really like that. Because then I know they beat Ohio State, and that would make it even better. You guys lost to that team? We beat them for the Natty. So that's my last thought for the show. Anything else you got for the final bell?
No, check out southboundsports.com, and there's some good stuff on there.
Yeah, definitely follow the feed. We've been getting a ton of downloads lately. So go in, make sure you subscribe. I don't care if you use iTunes or whatever. Some people are using Stitcher. I think I have links to a bunch of different things, Spotify on there. So you can follow on whatever you listen to. I know we're even on if you have an Alexa device or a Google Home, it should come up on those devices if you ask it. so you can even just listen to it at home. And we have some other things in the works that I've been talking with Matt on ways to expand the show. So if you have any ideas, make sure you hit us up. You can hit us up through email. We've been getting a lot of emails lately, or social media, which I apologize, I haven't been keeping up with that much. But we'll be getting back into it this year. Let's put the coronavirus year behind us and let's get back to regular sports. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.